storm roof murdered 9 Black people at a church in South Carolina. Because teens from East Chapel Hill High School thought it appropriate to mock slavery on social media. Because white teachers are likely to have low expectations for Black students. Because Donald Trump. America, we need to wake up and realize that it's time to pass anti-racist education policy for our K-20 curriculum. Our schools need to intentionally educate against racism and require educators to receive anti-racism training. Educational policy requiring schools to do so is the place to start. In 1954, the Supreme Court declared de jure segregation illegal with the decision in Brown versus Board of Education. However, the decision only addressed the structural racism and not the ideological racism embedded in curriculum or in individuals. This ideological racism has persisted virtually unchecked by our educational system and has actually resulted in the perpetuation of white superiority and a racially inequitable educational system. This inequitable system could be related to the white ethnic studies curriculum that has fostered and maintained an achievement gap. The 2007 and 2009 National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, found that 4th and 8th grade reading and math proficiency, on average, demonstrated a 28-point gap between white and Black students and a 24-point gap between white and Latino students. Unless we believe that Black and brown students are incapable of doing better, we should be alarmed by these numbers. Is this gap directly related to a white ethnic studies curriculum? I don't know. I think additional research should be conducted to address this question. I do know that earlier this year, Stanford released a study based in a San Francisco high school where students who were at risk of dropping out enrolled in an ethnic studies course. They found that, quote, students not only made gains in attendance and grades, they also increased the number of course credits they earned to graduate, end quote. Is there a correlation between learning about one's own ethnicity as well as others and student achievement? The data, not just from this single study, but from multiple, say yes. And students such as the young females who attended East Chapel Hill, maybe they would not have shared a racist post glorifying the Confederate flag had they received a different kind of ethnic studies education, one rooted in anti-racism. Further, Black students are likely to be viewed as a threat by white teachers as early as kindergarten. In the Journal of Psychological Science, researchers assessed racial biases in 64 white participants. Without much time to process, participants were shown, and I quote, a photo of either a Black or white 5-year-old's face and then an image of a gun or toy. Participants were quicker to identify guns after seeing photos of Black boys than they were when seeing white children. When researchers showed the participants white faces, the participants mistakenly labeled guns as toys in greater frequency than when primed with an image of a Black kid, end quote. Can anti-racist education during younger ages lessen the impact of racial biases when students become adults? I think so. Students of color who experience racial microaggressions at the hands of peers and educators are dropping out of schools to avoid these toxic environments. Bourdieu would argue that it's the habitus of whiteness within schools contributing to this toxic environment. Even more alarming, in 2012, the Annie E. Casey Foundation found that African Americans and Latinos are disproportionately represented in high school dropout rates, especially when they come from high poverty backgrounds. African American and Latino students who are from low socioeconomic status backgrounds and who do not pass a 3rd grade reading assessment are likely to drop out of high school at a rate of 31% and 33% respectively. This is a very significant concern because the overall quality of life is lessened by not having a high school diploma. Could an anti-racist curriculum help address this issue? I think so. Additionally, white teachers who make up roughly 80% of the American teacher force are less likely to have high expectations for Black students. In a study conducted by researchers at Johns Hopkins and American University, researchers found, and I quote, when a Black teacher and a white teacher evaluate the same Black student, the white teacher is about 30% less likely to predict the student will complete a 4-year college degree. White teachers are also almost 40% less likely to expect their Black students to graduate high school. End quote. Could a policy that requires all teachers to participate in anti-racist education training help deter the racial biases in teachers? It wouldn't hurt to try. I could go on and on about the disproportionate effects for students of color of an educational system rooted in racist practices. With all the data out there, it's time for America to answer some serious questions. Are we okay with an educational system built on white supremacist values that time and time again reproduces inferiority in students of color and superiority in white students? Are we okay with a system that doesn't challenge the perpetuation of whiteness, that produces college students who year after year host racist parties mocking marginalized communities? Are we comfortable with that data? Just this weekend at AERA, Dr. Ricky Lee Allen, a critical race scholar at the University of Mexico, said, and I quote, "Schools turn whites into cultural oppressors," end quote. Some of these cultural oppressors go on to become educators who continue the cycle of racist educational practices that rob white youth of their humanity and students of color of an equitable educational opportunity. Dr. Tandika, who has a PhD in philosophy of religion and theology, writes, "The first racial victim of the white community is its own child." And Dr. Zeus Leonardo, a cultural studies professor at UC Berkeley, would support that claim and add that because of this victimization within classrooms, the injured become injurers. One of the best ways to challenge this type of cultural reproduction is through anti-racist education policy. This would require equipping educators with the necessary skills to focus on both structural and ideological racism throughout their curriculum, and not just during, let's say, Black History Month. Curriculum would need to be revamped and teachers trained where they are provided a history that includes a power analysis for understanding race as a social construct and how it came to be. The details of the implementation process will need to be fleshed out later. But right now, we have a racism problem in education that needs to be addressed. Actually, we've always had a racism problem in education, and according to critical race theorists, we always will. However, it can get better or worse depending on our next moves. And for far too long, we've avoided policy that talks about race. Race-based problems cannot be solved with race-neutral solutions. And unless we want more Dylan Storm Roofs, more Donald Trumps, or more teachers who bring racial biases into our classrooms, we need to act now and build upon what Brown v. Board left undone. Thank you.